It is 36 degrees at 15 minutes before the top of the hour. And of course, this is Health Monday. And two gentlemen who you know this morning with us every first Monday, or second Monday. First Monday? Is this first Monday?
Second I
Monday.
think.
Okay, all right. But Jared and Jacob here with us from Marble City Pharmacy. And before we get to our topic this morning, there's been much discussion and much in social media and everywhere you turn about the flu this year in Alabama. How do you guys see it in our local area?
Well, it's going very poorly from the standpoint of people being well. Particularly in the last week, we've had even more flu. And as you mentioned before we came on this morning, people are really, really sick with it right now. And, you know, it's hard to know if this is actually worse than years past, but so far it does look like the vaccine is maybe a 30 to 50% match from what's going around right now. And so that means that even people who've gotten the flu shot have gotten the flu. Now, let me be clear about this, just want to give this reminder. Getting the flu shot is still the right thing to do because it will keep you from being as sick as if you hadn't got it.
And very quickly, Jacob, people who have the flu.
Yes.
You know, us guys, we got to go to work.
I got to earn a living.
Yeah, but that's not basically the right thing to do, is it?
It sounds like the right. I'm going to show my employer how dedicated I am, right? No, it's a terrible idea. You're going to keep yourself sicker longer. You're going to spread it to other people. You know, economically speaking, any leading national economist will tell you that's a terrible idea for a workplace. Don't go to work when you're sick. General rule of thumb with the flu or any virus is you're not through being contagious until you're 24 hours fever-free. And so don't go to work. I know it sounds ridiculous. I'm going to show my boss how dedicated I am. No, that's a terrible idea. Don't go to work. Don't spread it. Keep it contained.
Also, don't come to work if you have a stomach bug. Let me just put that out there right now. For Marble City Pharmacy employees, don't come to work with a stomach bug. That's right.
Yeah, we don't want it.
A topic that has been in the forefront of medicine, and not just medicine, but our government, and for the last couple of years has been prescription drug abuse or misuse. Talk about that this morning, and is this different from addiction? Let's talk about it today.
Yeah, sure. Well, just some simple definitions, I guess, first. Let's start with drug misuse, prescription drug misuse. That would just be using a prescription differently in any way, shape, or form from the way it's been prescribed. That could even be underutilizing prescription medication. We have a lot of patients, unfortunately, who are not taking their medicine like the doctor prescribed. And so any type of misuse would be kind of defined like that. When you talk about drug abuse, that would be taking more than is prescribed, or taking it at times other than it's prescribed for reasons other than it's prescribed. And then addiction, I guess, would be a step further. That would be somebody who has abused drugs enough that their body almost has to have it. There have been changes in the brain to where it makes them want and crave and intensely desire the drug.
Is this rampant as it seems to be in our country today?
Oh my goodness, it is a leading problem to the point that the federal government's looking at it, every government agency is looking at it, states are looking at it, because it leads to other things. It leads to crime. It leads to economic loss and job issues. It leads to family issues. It leads to things that cost the government, the taxpayer money, costs our legal system money. It causes health problems, costs our health system tons of money. And so it's a huge issue being looked at all across the board right now, and it is widespread. I saw a number, I think last night, that every single day in the United States, 2,500 teenagers will try a narcotic for the first time, a prescription narcotic for the first time. 2,500 a day in the United States.
It used to be parents and grandparents, they would get their medication and put it in the medicine cabinet and not think a whole lot about it. But that's not basically the case today.
No, and that's one of our major problems. There's a phenomenon that some young people call skittling, and what they'll do is they'll go into their parents' medicine cabinet, their grandparents, whoever, and they'll grab whatever's in there, bring them together, put them in a bowl, and unfortunately, kids will just take some out of the bowl, obviously not having any idea what's in there. That would be on the extreme end of complete foolishness, obviously. But there is a problem with medicine cabinets. I've had friends and loved ones take medicine out of my medicine cabinet. And so that's rampant. It's continuing to go on. We got to protect those medications.
Jacob, what prescription drugs are more commonly abused?
Actually, that's an easy one to answer, and most people, if they thought about it long enough, would figure this out themselves. It's opioids, which are your prescription drug, prescription pain medicines.
Right.
There are what we would commonly call CNS depressants, brain depressants. Anxiety medicines, sleep medicines, those are in that category. And then third, it would be stimulants. Adderall, Ritalin, ADHD drugs, attention deficit drugs. Those are your three biggest categories and make up probably 80 to 90% of all prescription drug abuse.
How do you get your arms around this and what's being done to prevent or combat prescription drug abuse?
Well, like Jacob mentioned, it seems like that the federal government, the state and local governments, everybody is scrambling. The DEA, the FDA, what are we supposed to do about this problem? Unfortunately, that's led to some wayward strategies. Let me just put it like that. If you guys pay attention to the news at all, you know that many states, many cities, and local governments right now are suing some of our major drug wholesalers. We buy our medicine from a drug wholesaler called McKesson, but there's Cardinal and AmerisourceBergen. Those are kind of the big three in the United States. And a bunch of cities and states have come together in lawsuits against those wholesalers, basically wanting to put the blame at their feet. And just last week, those wholesalers released a statement that said, wait a second, our job is to meet the demand that's in the market. We don't prescribe the drugs. We don't take the drugs. This is not our problem. Another thing that's been done is that the manufacturers themselves have been sued over and over and over. It's your fault that there's prescription drug abuse in the marketplace. I personally think even that's misfounded, because the truth is that these medications exist for a reason, and so there are manufacturers out there who are trying to invent dosage forms that can't be abused, and I applaud them for that.
I guess from a layman's standpoint, you can just ask the question, why don't you just take them all off the market?
And that's one of the most common responses. So just get rid of all of them.
Get rid of
Well, the downside is then you're not thinking at that point of the real use and the intended use of these things. Your grandmother with cancer, it hurts. She needs pain medications. All these very legitimate uses of people and love every single day that are taking these medications, they have a very legitimate use and an absolutely necessary use. And so they're out there. And that's the reason they're out there. And that's the reason they're in grandma's medicine cabinet or in mom and dad's medicine cabinet, because there are people who have serious issues and desperately need these medications. And for those things, they are a blessing to be able to have these medications. But then, as with anything, you take it too far and things go south.
What about, I don't know, can over-the-counter medication be abused too?
Yeah, unfortunately. And the one that you guys all know about is now been sold behind the counter for years, and that is pseudoephedrine. Pseudoephedrine is a nasal decongestant, which I've been needing in the past few days, and half of the state of Alabama has been needing in the past few days. But people for years now have been taking it with all these crazy formulas and making an illegal drug, methamphetamine, out of it. You guys know that because 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you could go out to the shelf and buy all the pseudoephedrine you want. Now you have to show your driver's license at the counter, and it's a hassle and all that because bad people have done bad things with it. So that would be the first one. The second one would be second most common would be dextromethorphan, which you guys probably don't recognize that name, but it's in Robitussin DM. It's in Mucinex DM. It's the most common cough suppressant that's available over the counter. And what's happened is people have taken it in really large quantities and found out it's made them high. I don't know how this stuff starts. Who's the first person who drank the whole bottle of Robitussin DM? Who's the first person who took the whole package of Coracetin and HBP? I don't know. I don't know how they come up with this stuff. But it turns out that's probably the second most commonly abused over-the-counter drug. So we got to take caution there as well.
Kind of shows the grip of drug abuse and being addicted that has on our country today.
Absolutely. It's, what he's highlighting there is, somebody somewhere had an addiction problem and was in a bind in their addiction and had to try something. And that's how they discovered that if I drink enough of this in huge quantities, then I'll at least calm my addiction. We have emergency room physicians will tell you they can spot this one a mile away, an extremely common drug called tramadol. It's a mild narcotic. Well, if I've got a raging narcotic addiction, heroin, whatever, and I'm in a bad place and I can get my hands on some tramadol to get my addiction to quell a little bit, I have to take a ton of it to make that happen. Well, when I take a ton of that, I have serious complications, and I end up in the emergency room. And most emergency room doctors can spot it a mile away, walk in, that's an overdose on tramadol, because you have to take a gazillion pills to make up for that heroin dose you didn't get.
You know, I do want to be clear about this. There are people, especially teenagers and young people, who experiment with these medications for the first time for no good reason at a party or whatever. But the truth is that most prescription drug abuse starts from a good place. And maybe a person has had surgery and they have pain from that surgery and they need the medication. And then, due to an unfortunate series of events, sometimes it turns into something that that it ought not to be. The same thing for medicines like your anxiety medicines. They're used to treat panic attacks. They're used to treat anxiety that's real. And those patients need that medication. So same thing for ADHD. So I think that, just speaking for both of us, we want to be perfectly clear. These medications have a right use. These patients are not going to these medications to end up in a bad place. But sometimes, unfortunately, it happens and you have to end up getting help.
And Jacob, not necessarily are these people that find themselves in that bad place, they didn't start out to end up where they are.
No, and it would take 10 of these segments to explain the differences in the individual brains that make some people more likely to be addicted to something than others. We don't have time for that this morning. Just know that, if you're out there, certain people can take something and never have an addiction problem. Certain people can take it and have an addiction problem from the first time. And you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And so, you go to the doctor, you have a knee surgery. He prescribes you 3 days worth of a narcotic because it's going to hurt for a few days. That can go south, or it cannot. More often than not, it doesn't. Everything's perfectly fine. You take it for 3 days, you get over it. But every now and then, there's that person who develops an addiction, or there's a second surgery, or there's an injury, or there's something down the line, and it builds. And so, no, the vast majority of these people, when we say prescription drug abuse, everybody at home is thinking, those teenagers. And that's the mental image they got. No, that's not the most common mental image. The most common image we should get is your average, everyday, everybody you pass on the street is susceptible to this problem because it starts from a good and legitimate place, and then it goes down quickly if we have trouble with it.
How do we prevent, Jared, our medicines being abused by someone else? What are some of the safeties we can handle?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, we talked about this in this segment before. Don't share your medications with other people, and that would be a voluntary way. Don't share your medications with other people. Don't take other people's medications. Those medications were given to you by a physician who's looking at all your signs and symptoms. He or she may be looking at your blood work, things that your medication regimen is tailored specifically to you. So don't swap back and forth. Secondly, I think we need to all take better care of what we do with these medications as far as storage. I never would have thought about this had it not even happened to me in my own home. Get these medications that are susceptible to these problems, put them in a safe place where nobody else can find them except for you.
Wow. What if someone watching this morning possibly is struggling with this issue? We're trying to work, we're trying to raise a family, and we're struggling. We don't want anybody to know about it. Is there hope for these people?
Absolutely, there has to be, and there is. What I tell these people, first and foremost, let's not wait until I've been arrested to go, hey, I might have a problem. Yeah. Let's not wait till we're buying from some guy on the street.
Too.
Sometimes it takes that.
It does take that a lot of times, and it's real, and that does absolutely happen. What our message to those people is you're in a bad place. Something has happened and led you to a bad place. But there's help. There are addiction networks. There are therapies. There are rehabs. There are even, it sounds counterintuitive, there are other drugs that we can use to help you get off of these more dangerous drugs you're addicted to or more addictive drugs. So the first step, is, well, I'll say the first step is admitting you have a problem. But in this case, the first physical step is to speak to someone, that you trust. It usually begins with your physician. You're getting those drugs from somewhere. Let's talk with your physician. What can you do as my physician to either get me in a rehab facility or get me some medicine to help me get off of this or get me to the right person? That's usually the first step. Talk to your pharmacist, talk to your doctor, talk to whoever. Make sure others around you are aware to hold you accountable, your spouse, whatever you need. But it's a long and it's a difficult process, and it's tough to be successful at this. You need help with this process. You can't do it by yourself.
There are privacy laws that help protect that individual from. Did you hear about Joe down the street, you know?
Oh, sure. Just let's be perfectly clear about it. I'm glad you said that. We may never discuss that on
We
this
take it for
segment.
granted. Yeah.
When you say things to us, there are laws that prevent us from repeating that to anybody. Now, let's be clear. We wouldn't do that anyway. But there are laws that prevent health professionals from taking your information and going somewhere else with it. So absolutely. If it's a life or death situation and your life is in imminent danger, then those laws don't apply. But otherwise, what you tell us is in confidence. Absolutely.
Finally this morning, what responsibility does a pharmacist have in making sure that, I mean, you guys got all these people coming in there and medication after medication after medication. How do you kind of keep a grip on things and say, hey, you know, we might need to take a look at this?
It's very difficult. The way you acknowledge the sheer numbers. You know, we'll fill 500 and some odd prescriptions or more. And 20 to 25% of those will be for controlled substances. And so the numbers are huge. How do we keep a grip on it? We do the best we can, and we use professional judgment. We look for signs. First of all, thank goodness now the state maintains a database. If you get a controlled substance in my pharmacy, in the pharmacy next door, and the pharmacy next door, I can look that up and know it. I don't have to wonder anymore. But then there are other telltale signs. You're always requesting your refills early. You're suspiciously lose your medication a lot and need some extra. Oh, this happened, dropped it in the toilet, which, I mean, these things legitimately happen sometimes, but there's a pattern. And so we start to look for things like that. Your doctor starts to look for things like that. And so that's really all we can do. Unfortunately, in our position, we're more often having to be reactive rather than proactive. We're waiting until, oh wait, there's a few signs. Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Rather than going, hey, here's your first prescription you've ever had for this. Let me take 10 minutes and talk to you about, I don't have that time, you don't have that time. It's hard to do, and it's almost impossible with the numbers we do. But that may be the better answer in the long term is, hey, let's take 5 minutes and talk about what could happen with this and scare you to death, unfortunately, the first time you ever take this. And maybe that's a better answer, I don't know. But we see it every day.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us this morning.
Thanks a lot.
And of course, Health Monday is one time a month here on Daybreak. If we keep going like this, we may have to expand it, But Jared and Jacob from Marble City Pharmacy and Health Monday, we've got more Daybreak right after this.